So when it comes to migrating, there's a lot of challenges. It's a challenge when it comes to planning and preparing a migration, getting that visibility, understanding what you have, running that inventory, understanding what the destination, limitations and thresholds are, so that you're not ending up with a fragmented migration requiring all of these incremental migrations to fix. Moving large data sets without disruptions, asking your users to simply stop working as you move terabytes or petabytes of data is simply a no-go. So how do you allow them to continue to be productive while you can go ahead and run that migration? Ensuring data migration integrity. Sure, ShareGate tells me that my migration ran, or I manually drag and drop petabytes of data, which I wish upon no one. How do I know that it is the same at the destination as it was at the source? How do I get that visibility, and how do I share that with the stakeholders in my organization? Minimizing the amount of manual work, I think we've touched on that quite a lot, and minimizing downtime, having a smooth end user experience. Those are all things that we hear a lot when it comes to migrations when we speak to our clients. But then you have to actually get to the cloud or get to a newer version of SharePoint. And then once you're there, it's a challenge to manage Microsoft 365. There's a lot. Everything is changing all the time. It's super hard to keep up. It seems like in the last 6 months, everything is called Copilot now, and Microsoft's maybe naming convention tends to be quite tricky. Don't get me started on the Xbox naming convention. That's a whole different conversation. But so much is changing, and you're working so hard and spending 40 hours a week just answering tickets and making the organization, keeping the organization productive. How can you be expected to keep up with everything that is going on? Adapting to user needs, keeping everyone happy, keeping them productive. Some people want this, some people don't like that, some people don't understand it. There's maybe little training. Meeting the users where they are can be a very big challenge for Microsoft 365. Content creation. So it's easier than ever now to create content in Microsoft 365 as an end user. But if you just open Pandora's box, good luck putting everything back into it, or at least having control of visibility on that without at least a tool like ShareGate. Addressing the skills gap. Some people know how to use Microsoft 365. Some people are excited and curious about it, and others are terrified. Ensuring business continuity, keeping operations going as you adapt to these new changes, as you put in place new processes, you deploy new tools, collaborating with end users. That's one of the biggest ones, and we're going to touch on that a lot today. Your end users are now empowered. They can get their work done whenever, wherever, and we hope that you encourage that in your organization. The pros really outweigh the cons. But if you let them do everything, it would be great to be able to speak with them in an automated fashion and ask them, is this still useful? Is this still relevant? Can you let me know how I can, maybe discontinue or archive what you've been using so that we can keep a lean environment, right? Meet me halfway. I enable you, but I need you to be responsible and help me back. So how do we get there in a way that is scalable with minimal friction for users? Communication and collaboration. If your teams, if the tools and the deployment is inefficient and there's little training, people are not necessarily going to know how to work, and that can hurt productivity and so on. So I'm not going to go through the entire list. You get it. Microsoft 365 is not as easy as just deploying it to your users and saying good luck. That's the wild, wild west, and nobody wants this. And you end up with tenants that have gone wild. So you end up being in a reactive mode. So you're responding to issues as they arise. People are creating tickets. They don't understand what's going on. So you're spending less and less time strategizing, planning, and bettering your environment, and more time trying to patch the issue from yesterday just so that your users can keep working. And the more you're chasing your own tail like this, the less you can get to that Zen Microsoft 365 tenant that just works. You end up feeling overwhelmed. You go from what you know, which is maybe I have my SharePoint sites and my subsites and my libraries and the tools and workflows that I have, and that works for us, and we want that way of working, to Microsoft 365, which is now modern, Microsoft 365 group enabled, that leverages Teams, that is a flat environment. There's all these changes that can feel quite daunting, and the impacts of that are very real. And you can feel exposed. Inadequate governance, regulation, and enforcement can lead to a lot of security risks, and that can unfortunately lead to data leaks, to hacks. We see it all the time. And that's not necessarily just a reputational impact on the organization, but very much a monetary one as well. So we want to limit that as much as possible. We want to find that middle ground where productivity and security can coexist. We have a quote here from Astrid Gibbon, who we interviewed about her experience in Microsoft 365. And she says she had no control over what data was going in Teams or whether people were cleaning up or reviewing external links and guest access. So Astrid wanted people to get their work done. People need to share documents externally. People needed to create places, workspaces where they can collaborate. And she understood that, and she wanted to grant that to her users. But unfortunately, that came at a cost, and she ended up in this mess that she couldn't clean up until she met ShareGate. So in a perfect world, you're ahead of the game. You've planned out your governance strategy. You've figured out the potential challenge that you might face. You've acquired the tools and you've put them into place so that you can prepare yourself for what's coming up. You have a solid management strategy for Microsoft 365. You're not in reactive mode anymore. You figured it out, you've planned it out, and you're ahead of the game, and you have complete control over your environment. And now I want to put an asterisk on this. When I say complete control over your environment, I mean that you can have this without stripping control away from your users. You will see that you will lose a lot of time if you try and keep control by not allowing your end users to do things in Microsoft 365. And we all know that this leads to shadow IT, where they create things and unapproved apps without your approval or your visibility. It leads to people's productivity hurting. It leads to a lack of adoption. So there is a way for you to have control through visibility, through automation, through dashboards, through collaboration, while also allowing your end users to get their work done in the way that they want when they want. There's an interesting study that was run by Gartner, where they interviewed 226 CFOs back in 2022 about digital acceleration. And what they found is that the top spending priorities for CFOs over the next 12 months, so going to 2023 and beyond, was that 98% of respondents said that they will protect digital investments. And of those, 66% stated that they plan to increase their investments in this category. So when we talk about digital acceleration, we're talking about three things: back office automation, so technologies that automate repetitive manual tasks, IT services, procurement, and so on. Pricing optimization analytics, so technologies that help optimize the pricing strategy and execution based on data and algorithms. And finally, digital acceleration, so technologies that enhance the speed and agility of business processes and operations. So the reason I'm sharing these stats with you is that you may feel like you are not going to be able to convince the powers that be that a tool like ShareGate or any other tool really to help you better your Microsoft 365 experience is worth the money. We'll touch on the pricing of the subscription in a bit, but at the end of the day, upper management knows that this is a priority if they want to be successful in this market. It's not a budget question. Well, it could be a budget question, but it's not a value question. So there are ways to present this, and we can always help you do this. But at the end of the day, if you want to be where the top players are, you have to put in the investment. And ideally, that's not an investment of time that you don't have. So that's where ShareGate comes in. You can leave that boring part to us. You can let us do that heavy lifting. And we'll help you with all these different stages in Microsoft 365. From getting there to giving your users a better way to create what they need, while also granting you the control to set up those provisioning templates. We can help you manage permissions, external sharing, guest access. We can help you have that governance strategy in motion in place to keep control over the tenant and more. So we're going to dive into that a little bit deeper, starting with migrations, because there's no point in talking about Microsoft 365 if you're not even there yet. Or if you're in a different tenant and you're considering a switch to a new tenant, maybe following an M&A, well, this is where it begins. One of the first migraines that we hear a lot about migrations, it's that tools are expensive. And I get it. And it can be true. There's oftentimes quite a lot of features that tend to be gated behind an expensive subscription. This is where ShareGate is different. We don't have a data cap, for one. So we talked about, I remember one of the biggest words that we saw in the word cloud there was data, being terrified about the amount of data you need to migrate. Well, with ShareGate, we don't charge you based on the amount of data at all. So whether you're migrating 1 megabyte or 10 petabytes, we're not going to charge you an extra penny for that. And we actually even have archival capabilities where you can host content in ShareGate's Azure storages, and we don't even charge you for that. It's one fixed price, one license. So you pay for ShareGate on an annual basis. You can even pay for ShareGate on multiple years to get rebates, and then you can get your work done. You can migrate to your heart's content without needing to worry about potentially realizing in 6 months' time that there's an aspect of your environment you didn't think about, and now ShareGate is going to ask you for more money. That's just not how we do things. So we migrate teams. If you're in a tenant and you're going through an M&A and you need to bring those teams alongside their channels, alongside the memberships of the Microsoft 365 group, alongside the planner and the tabs, we bring all of this, and of course, alongside the content as well. So ShareGate can help you migrate all of these teams and will recreate everything that is associated to it at the destination, even the site collection, the team site that's connected to the team, all in one swift motion. You can even migrate your planner plans. So if you started using Planner and you have Planner that maybe isn't even connected to your teams, ShareGate can help you take all these little pieces and really bring them all together to have that unified modern Teams experience for your users. I want to touch a little bit more on that maybe fragmented experience and all of the requirements that come with a migration project. Thanks to Doug from Avani, you're here, that shared his thoughts on using ShareGate when it comes to running these large-scale migrations.
We don't have any anxiety after the fact. So, did everything move over? Is a client going to come back to us and say, hey, I'm missing document XYZ or document library XYZ? We don't have to worry about doing that after the fact because we know that ShareGate just works. Are there certain situations that we found that there's extenuating circumstances and edge cases? Sure. But those are definitely few and far between.
So you can take it directly from Doug. It's as simple as it can get. Choosing the tool and implementing that tool and using that tool should not be the difficult part of a migration process. The planning, the strategizing, the defining how that destination is going to work, helping your users with adoption, setting up training. Those are the things that are important. Those are the things that should be completely under your control. It's that human aspect that we can provide guidance on, and we certainly do it with webinars and blog posts. But that's something that you need to do. And we don't want to be that friction that just complicates the process of running migrations. And that's really what we strive for here. Balancing productivity and security is also important when it comes to our migration. And that's why with ShareGate, it's fully configurable. ShareGate is an in-between between being a powerhouse that can do everything, but also being as simple as possible. We have some of the best UI and user experience on the market when it comes to a migration experience. You could pick it up today, log in, grab all your sites and migrate, and it'll take you 5 minutes to figure it out. It's as simple as can be. You don't need to do a lot of configurations to do it. But if you want to be selective in what comes over, bring my libraries, but not the content, bring the workflows, but don't bring the forms, change my metadata, but don't map permissions. You can really kind of approach that in the way that works for you and really configure it to your organization's needs. If you run a migration, you figure out that, hey, some things didn't come because of XYZ reason. A template wasn't properly mapped. A column was missing at the destination or whatever could happen. Migrations can be messy. It's very easy to run an incremental migration with ShareGate. With 1 to 2 clicks, you recover one of your sessions, and then you just incrementally copy. ShareGate's going to update that destination, bringing over those changes, updating that destination. So you don't need to rerun the entire migration just because of one little hiccup. You can schedule your migrations to run after hours. It's a lot of challenges with Microsoft 365 from a throttling perspective, where Microsoft has this mechanism in place to regulate resource usage. But by scheduling your migrations, breaking them down into smaller pieces, you can avoid those throttling hiccups and make sure that your users come to work on a Monday morning and everything just works. So from a preparation standpoint, ShareGate allows you to scan your source and understand what you need to be aware of. Are there any templates that are not going to be available at the destination? Any list templates that aren't available? Maybe some files that are checked out that are not going to come over. And of course, we give you that ability to check in all of those files so you don't have to wonder or figure out after the fact that this was a challenge. So we'll scan everything. We'll give you that visibility. And from those results, you can even go directly onto our help center, where our documentation team, which is honestly, they're miracle workers. They have created all of these articles that give you exactly the explanation of what's happened, why it happened, how you can fix it, any workarounds that if exists. So we really don't leave it up to you to kind of figure it out. We help you throughout the whole process. And if you don't want to dive into documentation, well, and you'll meet them a little bit later today, we have an incredible customer success team, including Charles, who's on the call, that can help you troubleshoot those challenges, get on a call, share your screen, and really work through those problems so you can get back to what truly matters. Let's say you've done all of that preparation. You've scanned your environment, you figured out the errors and the warnings, you've fixed it, and you're just about to run the migration, but you're not quite sure yet. You can even run a pre-check. ShareGate's going to simulate the migration, basically testing the destination without really pushing the content, without really creating anything, so that you can catch potential issues you may have forgotten and even test your migration. So as you can see, there's a lot of fail safes to help you prepare as much as possible so that the process of writing the migration is as smooth as it can be. We spoke about this a little bit from when it comes to copying incrementally. You can copy incrementally from a content perspective, from a structure perspective. So whether or not some files were left behind because they were checked out, or because there were some errors, or because maybe the file path was too long at the destination, or some lists and libraries got added to the source site over the past month, and you're about to go through that cutoff and you want to bring over those missing libraries. You can absolutely do that with ShareGate. Now, when you run an operation with ShareGate, whether it be a migration, a promotion of a subsite into a site collection, whether you run a report, run a copy of content, you merge two teams together, you move channels from A to B, whatever you run, ShareGate gives you a very clear, concise, but also customizable migration report, allowing you to understand the status of everything that was involved in this migration. And those answers, those results that you see in the migration report, come directly from the destination. So we hand off elements to Microsoft 365. Microsoft 365, like the butler of the new house, maybe in a, if we were to use a metaphor of a moving company, we move everything, we tell the butler this goes there, butler puts it exactly at the right place, and then comes back to ShareGate and says, we're good to go. I put it in the kitchen, it's exactly where you wanted it. So we get that validation straight from the destination, which can be sometimes maybe not user friendly to understand, and we rework that. We make it more simple, we clarify it so that you, the end user, can understand exactly what went down, and you can customize it to see exactly what migrated and when, and what was the status of it, and anything that you need to know. So you get all the visibility that you need so that you can have that peace of mind that the migration was successful. And you can manage permissions. Now, this is something I want to take a little bit more time to explain, because it might not be something you've thought about as you're considering your move to Microsoft 365, but it's worth mentioning. Getting a holistic perspective or view of permissions in your environment is always a good idea. You can schedule these reports to run at a given frequency and then automatically have ShareGate send it into to the right parties so that they can confirm that these people should have access to things. We give you a lot of ways to get visibility on permissions. But you might be wondering, Sam, why would I even need to do this? I can just take everything and migrate it to Microsoft 365, as you said, and keep those permissions and everything's going to work, right? And the answer is yes. ShareGate's going to preserve everything as it is. But the challenge with Microsoft 365 is with those pesky Microsoft 365 groups. If you have a very custom permission oriented source environment where you've broken inheritance in many places and this library grants permission and this content grants permission to that person and so on, well, that's not necessarily going to work in Microsoft 365 because when you use Teams, when you use team sites, you have your Microsoft 365 group where you have your members and your owners and your visitors. And whoever is part of this Microsoft 365 group should have access to all of the associated resources. So the team and the team site. If you break inheritance on your site and you make this a team site, well, you're going to have one set of permissions, which is people with explicit access on the content in your SharePoint site. But then you're going to have a Microsoft 365 group with different people in it. So you might have users going to the SharePoint site and seeing certain content, but then going into the team and not seeing that content. So there's very much a transformation that needs to take place as you adopt the cloud, where you need to become more Microsoft 365 group centric. Getting that visibility and understanding who has access to what as you make that switch. What are those permissions? Who should be put in the group? Who shouldn't? What sites need to become a team site? And what sites maybe can just remain a non-Microsoft 365 group connected site or a communication site maybe? Those are all things that will come from planning and understanding the permissions in your environment. All that to say, ShareGate can grant you the permissions, visibility that you need to make those decisions, but then also grant you the tools to manage those permissions. You can check, you can remove, you can add, you can copy permissions. Very easy to manage that. You won't need to go into each and every individual site or group and then update those manually. ShareGate allows you to do that in bulk in a much easier way. And the third migraine we hear a lot is migrations being complex with a lot of moving parts. So we don't want you to have to migrate everything one by one. First, I'm going to migrate the sites, and then I'm going to migrate the libraries. And then, all right, I got to bring my managed metadata, and I got to bring my columns. And then I got to bring my content, of course. Oh, and then I got to update the permissions. Imagine doing this for an environment with 1,000 sites or with thousands of users. So with ShareGate, we really keep it as simple as possible. You can be as granular as you want. So if you just need to move content between two different libraries, it's very easy to do so. But if you want to be at the highest scale and say, here's my source tenant or my source SharePoint on-prem environment, I'm going to grab every single site and migrate everything that's found within them to the destination, that's absolutely going to work. So you really have those options to you, and you're probably going to find that the answer is somewhere in between. So as you move to the new environment, maybe you want to pull off the Band-Aid. Let's move everything over. And then once we're done, then we'll go into that cleanup year where we consolidate sites and we move content into unified libraries as we discontinue some of the unused or unneeded things. Maybe we're gonna merge some teams together because some projects kind of start being finalized, and now we just want to bring all of that content collaboration back together. There's 1,001 different scenarios, and you can really approach it however you want. We give you a lot of flexibility for users, permissions, and metadata as well. No two environments are going to be the same. If you go from one tenant to another, the ways of work there at the destination are likely to be different. So if you don't have those columns at the destination, you're going to need to create them. If the metadata can be accepted at the destination, that's a challenge. So ShareGate gives you a lot of options to not only map your users so that you can be sure that your users have access to the right things based on who they are, and we can map those permissions, but we can also allow you to manipulate the metadata in your migration. What I mean by this is if the destination's way of working is different than what you have at the source, you're likely going to need to make some changes to your metadata. Or I'll give you another example. Maybe you're going from one library to another. You're taking some content, you want to plug it into a destination library, but that library at the destination has a column, and the column is called, has this invoice been paid? And now everybody at the destination expects to be able to very quickly validate whether or not all of the items found in the library have been paid or not. But your source content didn't have that library. So you need to update that metadata at the destination. How are you going to do this? So you're going to drag and drop the content and manually go into every single file and then update the metadata for all of it. That's way too much. So with ShareGate, we give you two ways of doing it. Either throughout the migration process, you can export your target to a CSV, and then in Excel, you just populate the metadata however you wish. You can add metadata, you can delete metadata, you can change metadata. You can even alter the document by removing entries that you don't want to migrate based on certain metadata values. Let's take that example again of the invoice. Let's say you just want to migrate the invoices that have been paid. Well, that's probably because you have a column that says paid, yes or no. So what you can do is you can use ShareGate and say, hey, let me take this target, export that to a CSV, and then I'm going to filter my document based on the paid metadata value. So you're going to remove the things that haven't been paid, and the things that have been paid, well, I'm going to migrate that over to the destination. So that's the kind of manipulations that you can do, either from a filtering standpoint to a metadata updating standpoint. And you know what? If you haven't thought about all of these scenarios as you're doing your migration, you can bulk edit an existing library in its existing environment, library or list, whichever one you want. So we give you all the options so that you can make sure you're updating things as need to be updated. We could do a quick time check here, or basically on time. Copy structure and content. We talked about this a little bit. That's the big migration tool or the big migration function. So if you're going through your first ShareGate experience and you're wondering, what is that feature that brings everything that I need over during my migration? That's the guy. This is what allows you to be as granular as you want, all the way down to the library level, or as wide as you want, where you grab a lot of sites. We have a quote here from a partner that we interviewed about their experience. And what they shared is that, they had total visibility on what was going on. They understood every aspect of their environment and what needed to get done. So any mistake could not go undiscovered. Their users were very eager to know if their content permissions had been copied, and we were able to prove that everything had transferred correctly. And again, visibility is key. We're all humans. We want to make sure everything went well. We're protective of our departments. We're protective of our work. So sometimes we need that validation. We need that visibility. And we really make it as easy to understand that information as possible, but also as easy as possible to automate the process of sending that useful information to the right parties. So that's a bit of a all-encompassing view of the migration aspect of ShareGate. And of course, we haven't touched on Mailbox migration yet. I know it's coming, but I want to spend a little bit of time talking about management, because there is a lot of fears and a lot of worries surrounding governance in what we saw. And this is where ShareGate can take those menacing, miserable management challenges and allow you to breeze through them. And it all starts with security. So with ShareGate, we have a very easy to understand, all-encompassing, consolidated view of all of your workspaces in Microsoft 365. Your team site, your teams, your communication sites, who's part of these workspaces, what kind of external sharing is taking place in them, what activity is taking place in those workspaces. No need to get lost in all of these admin centers. We give you all the visibility that you need. And I want to remind you, it's not about removing control from users. It is about granting you the right automation, the right visibility, so that you can understand what is going on and then change your strategy, change your governance to meet the reality of your users and the policies of your organization. So, for example, let's say you have a sprawling tenant with maybe thousands of teams, and you would like to see which teams were created over 6 months ago that have not been used since then and that have external sharing links, and of those, which ones of those teams have sensitive data. Well, you can absolutely do that with ShareGate. You don't need to find a needle in a haystack. You can use our filters to really break it down to exactly what your use case is, and then either manually take action on those if you wish, safeguarding that content while removing the teams, promoting users to owners so that you can collaborate with them. There's a lot of different ways to go about it, but it all starts with visibility, because what you don't know, you can't safeguard. So we grant you as much as you need to take the right actions. And we allow you to do this without adding more manual work, more PowerShell scripts, more Power Automate on top of your shoulders. We have a very insightful cost calculator that's available on ShareGate.com that allows you to understand, based on the number of users that you have and the state of your tenant, how much it could potentially cost you in lost productivity from trying to build a manual machine so that you can meet those challenges of governance that you have. So with ShareGate, it's all ready to go. You connect, you grant consent, ShareGate crawls through your environment, and you can start taking action and setting those automated policies into place. It's as easy as can be. And the way that we do this is through policies. So ShareGate has 4 big policies that allow you to automate the process of governing your tenant. Inactivity detection allows you to understand which workspaces are not being used anymore. External sharing review allows you to understand where the external sharing is taking place in your environment, as well as guests being granted access to the tenant. And we have purpose and sensitivity tags allowing you to label your workspaces in an automated fashion to understand why they exist, what is their purpose, how are they being used, but also how sensitive is the data that is found in those workspaces. And those two, the purpose and sensitivity tags, will modulate the settings of the team, also changing the frequency at which the automation will trigger so that maybe you can have a more frequent checkup on teams that have a specific purpose or sensitivity that is a little bit more sensitive. But the best part about those policies is it's not just, all right, well, every month I'm going to look at these teams and then I'm going to give a report to the IT admin and say, hey, IT admin, here are your teams. Go clean it up. That's just not a solution. Because if you have thousands of teams and thousands of users and you have tickets to handle every day, you just don't have time to do these things. But not only that, between you and I, you're just not the right person. And I don't mean you're not the right person in that you don't have the skill set to do it, but you don't have the time and the information to make the best call. And the person that can make the best call is the owner of that workspace. If I, Sam, as an end user, create a team and I collaborate with my colleagues, and then down the road, maybe a month from now, we're not using it anymore. How are you supposed to know how we work, or to what extent the content there needs to remain there, maybe for external parties to have access to it? Nobody wants to be the IT admin that kills an external sharing link just before a partner gives a presentation that could secure, a giant deal. So you want to interact with the users and the owners and have them take action on those things. And that is exactly what ShareGate does. We collaborate with owners in an automated fashion. So ShareGate will reach out to the owners and say, hey, this team appears to be unused. What's going on? And then that owner can respond to ShareGate either through email or through the chatbot that is directly in Teams and decide what to do with their team. I'm still using it. Leave me alone. We're not using this at all. This was a test. I can delete it. Or you know what? I'm not using it anymore, but the content is still relevant. So let's archive it. And that process of archiving archives the team and its channels and its conversations and its content. And all of that can be hosted in ShareGate's Azure storage, if you wish, at no extra cost. So let's break that down. You have thousands of teams with content in all of them, content that could be required for auditing purposes down the road. And now we help you find these teams in an automated fashion that are inactive. So let's say overnight, we allow you to eliminate 30% of those teams. It makes for a much more productive environment and easier to understand tenant for users. And we take all of the content, we safeguard it so that you're not risking your content just for the process of your governance strategy. And we hold it for you. We make it accessible directly through the app. Even after your license expires, you can still fetch that content, and all of that at absolutely no extra cost. It's a real game changer. And when we start talking about AI and Copilot and all of these large language models that need to understand what is relevant in your tenant to provide your users with the right results, you just can't have sprawling content. You need to take that content out of where it is and make sure it becomes inaccessible to Copilot so that only the right things show up. And that's exactly what that can help you do. Astrid, who we talked about earlier, shared her thoughts. I literally click one button and it sends all those people an email or a message in Teams, and I can sit back and I can watch it unfold right in front of me. Yes, you can trigger it manually, but again, if you automate it, it'll happen without you needing to trigger it. Another partner of ours share their thoughts. Information security is very important to our organization. And before it was almost impossible to find all these sharing links. And now it's a scheduled review and everybody takes it seriously. And I want to stress this. From what we've seen in our own metrics of how our users use ShareGate, 85% of inactive teams, teams that are not being used anymore, are actually actioned by owners. Owners are saying, I'm using this, or I'm not using it, go ahead and archive it, not IT. So sure, there's still 15% of them that you need to manually take action on, but imagine how much time that'll save you. But we know that external sharing links are where a major security risk is. So for that, 99%, that's right, I know it sounds like a fake number, but it is real. 99% of external sharing links in an org are actually actioned by users. So what that means is that you may have a perception that users are not going to play ball. They're too busy. They don't understand the tech. They don't understand the need or the importance. But when you have the right solution in place that meets your users where they work in their inbox, directly in Teams, thanks to a chatbot, well, they don't have an excuse and they understand. And as long as you're making it as simple as possible, people want to help. People want to be collaborative. And that's really what that ShareGate experience is all about. It's about meeting people where they are and making it as easy as possible. And finally, ensuring a productive and secure environment for everyone means creating the right things the right way from the get-go. Inevitably, you'll have some cleanup to do with your tenant when you first deploy ShareGate. But what about the future? What about scaling that to what's coming? Well, with ShareGate's provisioning capabilities, we allow you to create templates so that users can create their workspaces the right way, with the right channels and the right configurations for the site in the back end and the right labels applied so that from the moment they just start working, all of that heavy lifting of understanding and setting up that governance strategy is already taken care of. That's really the way to safeguard and to foolproof your strategy for years to come. So there's a lot of settings that you can enforce with our provisioning templates. How many team owners are going to be required, a naming convention. There's even approval workflows. And I want to touch on that a little bit more. It's not a multi-level approval flow. And it is not about getting IT to approve a team. It's about getting the right people to approve the creation of a workspace. So let's say someone in marketing wants to use the marketing external project template to collaborate with their colleagues on an external project with external partners. Well, sure, you could receive that request as an IT admin, but who are you to know if this person should be working on that and whether or not there's not already another team that's relevant to that project? How about actually choosing your champion in the marketing team or the manager or the director of the marketing team and having them approve the creation of that workspace directly in Teams? That's what ShareGate can do. So you can have that safety net, but you don't need to be the person that handles that. And when things get approved, of course, we'll give you all that visibility so that you can go back and validate the actions that were taken. And of course, we have an end user app. As I mentioned many times, we meet users where they are. So sure, we have our Teams chatbot that will poke users directly in Teams, but they need to have a place to actually access all of the bells and whistles that we mentioned. So you can very easily pin an end user app to Teams for all of your users. No extra licensing. It's not a per user approach. There's no login required for them. They don't even need to download it manually. You go in the Teams admin center, you pin it for everyone. Bob's your uncle. They're good to go. And if they need to create a workspace, if they need to approve the creation of a workspace because they're an approver, review their external sharing links and guests, they can do all of that from the end user app. It meets them exactly where they're working. So here we are. It's time for the demo that everybody wants to see. It is time to look at Mailbox migration. Now I'm going to stop my sharing for a second as I put my windows on screen, and then we're going to look at this together. All right. So for those that are new to ShareGate, you'll notice that we have an online experience. So ShareGate is offered as a SaaS for all of those governance capabilities and policies that we mentioned and so on. But we also have the migration tool, which is where you'll be running your mailbox migrations. This is a client-side application. Laptop, desktop, VM, server, as long as it's not a Mac, well, you can always get a VM in there. You can use the migration tool wherever you are. What we're going to focus on now is really mailbox migration. What I have here is a mailbox. There's a lot of emails in there, and this is of one tenant. On the right side, I have the mailbox of a second tenant. So it's the same user. I'm about to go from one tenant to another, and we want to bring these emails over here. Now, there's a lot of junk on the left-hand side. Well, junk. Microsoft probably won't be happy with me saying this, but a lot of digests from Viva and the Message Center and SharePoint Online and so on. So we're not going to bring all of this. We're just going to bring the content that's relevant and makes for a cleaner demo. So you'll notice under Inbox here, I have a folder called Small Migration Test. And in this folder, we have 3 emails with attachments. We even have threads. And we have some emails in the sent box. And we also have this email here by John Doe. So these are the emails that we're going to bring just for clarity's sake. And the way we're going to do this is with the migration tool. So I want to stress that the migration of mailboxes is currently in public preview. What that means is that it's not a beta and it's not the full version. So it is limited in feature and scope for now, but we are taking on feedback. We want users to use them so that we can have a full release in the future. So what is currently supported is tenant to tenant migration of mail. So not on-prem to online, only online to online. It needs to be 2 different tenants, of course. And what we do migrate at this stage is emails and attachments and folders. So the way we're going to run this migration is by clicking on this and then connecting to our source tenant. Now, I already have a connection to my source tenant. We'll skip that step. I'll show you the connection to a destination tenant in a second. So here, I have a bunch of users. With ShareGate, you could just grab absolutely everything and migrate all of these users' mailboxes to the destination. But for the sake of the demo and for the sake of time, we'll just migrate one user. This fella right here. This matches the mailbox that we have here on the source. So I'm going to move over to the next screen, and this is where we connect to the destination tenant. Now, as a reminder, I can't migrate within the same tenant, so I'm going to add that connection. And this is how simple it is. Add the connection. I'm going to sign in with Microsoft. It's going to trigger that browser auth window. I'm going to choose the right account, which matches the user of that destination mailbox here. And we're connected. It's really this fast. And you'll see that experience for Mailbox, for Teams, for SharePoint sites, for content, for management, whatever you do, it is very quick and easy. No confusing backend stuff. So I can migrate absolutely everything if I want, or I can set a specific time range. So here, all of my emails on the left that we want to migrate were created on a specific date. So that's how I'm going to filter them. So December 21st is when those were created. So we're going to limit it to this. But again, I want to stress, do you want to bring absolutely every email since the beginning of time for that user's mailbox? You absolutely can. Do you want to just take the last 6 months and the rest can stay on the source? That works as well. So approach it however you wish, depending on your needs. And then we're going to continue to the next page. Now, ShareGate wants you to tell it who's the user at the destination. We know we have Samuel Martner at the source, but who's that user at the destination? Well, I could look for them. So ShareGate will give you the list of users at the destination. But to keep it simple, you can just run an auto mapping. ShareGate will find, based on the list of criteria, the matching user at the destination and map that user so that you can very quickly get to the migration. You can even create or export a mappings file so that if you create it in the past or you just create it now and you want to reuse it in the future, it's very easy to do this way. And next, we're going to map the internal recipients. Now, what this is I'm just migrating Samuel's mailbox. But what if Samuel had conversations with Alex or with Audrey or with Chloe? Well, we want to tell ShareGate who are those destination users that match those users in terms of internal recipients. So that when I click reply or reply all or so on, or I look at the BCCs, I actually see the right users. So we're going to map all of these users, again, just by running an auto mapping. As a reminder, we don't need to map all of these if we're migrating every single mailbox, but because I'm just migrating one user, ShareGate does want me to tell it who the other users are. And that's it. We're now at the point where we're ready to migrate. We're going from this tenant to that one. We have our time range filter, which mailbox is being migrated. We even have all of our items here that are going to follow through, and we're ready to start that copy. And just to show you how easy and straightforward it is, I'm just going to move this window down a little bit, and we're going to start that copy in real time, and we're going to see the mailbox emails appearing here at the destination. And we're done. The mailbox has been migrated. So let's take a look at that. So we could export the report, look at it. No need for this. It was a pretty successful migration in my opinion. So we can see under inbox, we have this small migration test folder, same thing that we had here on the source, in which we have our 3 emails. We can validate that the attachments came through, even the thread came through. We also have our emails in the sent items. We can see it here on both sides. And of course, based on that filter that we applied, we have that John Doe email that also copied through. And it's really that easy. That's the public preview experience of Mailbox. Migrate every user or specific users, depending on your needs. Make sure the mapping is correct. Leave it up to ShareGate if you want to automatically map. Press start, and all your mailboxes have been migrated. And we know that that was oftentimes the missing piece that required you to get a second tool on top of ShareGate to migrate those emails. But we're there. The future is now.